The smell of grilled corn and barbecue sauce filled the air as 3 generations of Chens gathered in Carol's sprawling backyard for their annual family reunion. Red paper lanterns swayed gently from the oak trees, and children's laughter echoed from the pool area. It was the kind of perfect summer day that made Sarah Chen grateful for the traditions that kept their extended family connected. Sarah watched with quiet pride as her 16-year-old daughter Emma moved gracefully between clusters of relatives, her arms full of thick envelopes that had been arriving all spring. Emma's face glowed with excitement as she shared her news with each aunt, uncle, and cousin. Acceptance letters to Stanford, MIT, UC Berkeley, and Northwestern, full scholarships to most of them. "Emma, sweetheart, tell Uncle Mike about the research opportunity at Stanford," Sarah called out, balancing a tray of drinks she'd just refilled from the kitchen. Emma's eyes sparkled as she launched into an animated explanation of the biomedical engineering program that had courted her for months. At 16, she was already published in 2 peer-reviewed journals and had spent her junior year developing water purification systems for rural communities. The family circle around her grew larger as more relatives gathered to hear about her achievements. "We're so proud of her," murmured Aunt Linda, squeezing Sarah's arm. "She's always been such a special girl." Sarah felt her chest swell with maternal pride. Emma had worked tirelessly for these opportunities, maintaining a perfect GPA while volunteering at the children's hospital and tutoring other students after school. She'd taught herself Mandarin to honor their family heritage and spent summers working part-time jobs to save for college expenses, despite Sarah's protest that it wasn't necessary. But as Sarah scanned the crowd, she noticed her 19-year-old niece Madison standing apart from the celebration, her face twisted with an expression Sarah had learned to recognize over the years, barely contained resentment. Madison was home from her sophomore year at a mid-tier state school, having recently received rejection letters from the graduate programs she'd applied to transfer into. The contrast between her academic struggles and Emma's soaring success was stark, and Madison had never been good at hiding her feelings. "I need to grab more ice," Emma announced, heading toward the house with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "Anyone need anything from inside?" The moment Emma disappeared through the sliding door, Madison's voice cut through the pleasant hum of conversation like a blade. "Honestly, I don't understand why everyone's making such a big deal about this," Madison declared loudly, her words carrying across the suddenly quiet patio. "It's not fair that an outsider gets all the opportunities that should go to real family members. I mean, let's be honest. Emma isn't even really a Chen. She's just some random Chinese kid Sarah picked up from an orphanage." The festive atmosphere died instantly. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Uncle Mike's beer can froze halfway to his lips. Even the children seemed to sense the shift, their voices dropping to whispers. Sarah stood frozen by the drink table, ice cubes spilling from the bag in her hands as Madison's words hit her like physical blows. Around the patio, family members exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one spoke up. No one defended Emma. The silence stretched on, heavy and damning. It was then that Sarah heard it, a sharp intake of breath from the sliding door. She turned to see Emma standing in the doorway, her face drained of color, the acceptance letters scattered at her feet where she'd dropped them. For a moment that felt like an eternity, Emma's eyes met Sarah's across the patio, filled with a pain so raw it made Sarah's chest ache. Then Emma turned and ran back into the house, leaving behind the scattered pieces of her dreams and the family that had just failed to defend her when it mattered most. Sarah's hands trembled as she set down the drinks and followed Emma into the house, her heart pounding with a mixture of rage and protective instinct. She found Emma locked in the upstairs bathroom, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Emma, honey, please open the door," Sarah whispered, pressing her palm against the wood. After several long minutes, the lock clicked. Emma emerged with red-rimmed eyes and mascara streaks down her cheeks, a sight that broke Sarah's heart completely. Her brilliant, kind daughter, who had worked so hard for everything she'd achieved, reduced to tears by casual cruelty. "I'm sorry, Mom," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know I shouldn't let it get to me. I know I belong here, but sometimes what, sweetheart?" Sarah guided Emma to sit on the edge of the bed, wrapping her arms around her daughter's shoulders. Emma was quiet for a long moment, then the words came tumbling out like water through a broken dam. "This isn't the first time, Mom. Madison's been saying things like this for years. She calls me the charity case when you're not around. She tells people I'm not really family, just your good deed project. When I got the scholarship to that summer science camp 2 years ago, she said it was only because I was a diversity pick, and that real American kids deserved it more." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "Emma, why didn't you tell me?" Because I thought if I just worked harder, if I proved myself more, maybe she'd stop. Maybe everyone would see that I really do belong here. Emma's voice cracked. But tonight, when she said those things and nobody stood up for me, I realized that maybe she's right. Maybe I'll always be an outsider trying to earn my place. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought about all the family gatherings where Emma had gone above and beyond, bringing homemade gifts, volunteering to help with setup and cleanup, always the first to congratulate others on their achievement. She remembered Emma's face during past holidays, how she'd sometimes grow quiet when Madison made subtle digs that Sarah had missed, brushing them off as cousin rivalry. And it's not just Madison, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. Aunt Carol laughs when Madison calls me Sarah's little import. Cousin Jake asked me last Christmas if I was grateful to be rescued from China. They all act like I should be permanently thankful for the privilege of being here, like I'm some kind of guest who might overstay my welcome. Sarah's mind raced, pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. How many times had she explained away dismissive comments as family teasing? How many times had she missed the microaggressions that had been steadily chipping away at her daughter's sense of belonging? Emma, listen to me, Sarah said firmly, taking her daughter's face in her hands. You are not a charity case, you are not a project, you are my daughter, and you belong in this family as much as anyone, with Chen blood running through their veins. More than some people, frankly. But even as she spoke the words, Sarah realized that her reassurance wasn't enough. The damage had been done by years of subtle attacks and family complicity. Emma had been fighting a battle Sarah didn't even know existed, and she'd been fighting it alone. As mother and daughter sat together in the quiet bedroom, Sarah felt something shift inside her, a cold, calculating anger that was far more dangerous than the hot fury she'd felt on the patio. Her family had failed Emma, had allowed a pattern of cruelty to continue unchecked, and now it was time for consequence. Sarah spent the rest of the barbecue in a state of barely controlled composure, making polite conversation while her mind worked furiously. She watched Madison hold court by the pool, basking in the attention as relatives awkwardly tried to pretend nothing had happened. She noticed how Carol shot warning glances at anyone who seemed about to mention Emma's achievements again. The family's commitment to protecting Madison's feelings over Emma's dignity was crystal clear. That night, after Emma had gone to bed early, Sarah sat at her laptop with a cup of coffee and began to dig. If her family wanted to play games about who really belonged, she was going to make sure they understood the rules. Her first discovery came within an hour of searching through old family documents and photo albums. Buried in a box of her mother's papers, she found a faded adoption certificate. Her beloved father-in-law, the family patriarch, everyone called Grandpa Chen, had been adopted at age 5 after his birth parents died in a car accident. The Chen family had taken him in, but the adoption had been quietly handled through a family friend who was a lawyer, and over the decades, the truth had been buried beneath layers of family mythology. Sarah stared at the document, her hands shaking. The man Madison and the entire family revered as the embodiment of Chen family values, the successful businessman who had built their family's fortune and reputation, was himself adopted. Emma had been with their family for 13 years, while Grandpa Chen had only lived with his adoptive family for 12 years before striking out on his own. But Sarah wasn't done digging. Over the next week, she made phone calls to elderly relatives, pieced together financial records, and followed digital trails that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of her sister's family. Madison wasn't just struggling academically, she was on academic probation for plagiarism, and had been caught cheating on her midterm exams. The sophomore at college description was generous. She was barely holding on to her enrollment, and would likely be suspended if she didn't drastically improve her performance. More damaging was what Sarah discovered about Carol's finances. Her sister, who had always presented herself as the successful family matriarch, had been quietly borrowing money from Sarah's accounts for months. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $800 there, always with promises to pay it back quickly. But the total had grown to nearly $15,000, money that Sarah had been saving in Emma's college fund. The final piece of the puzzle came when Sarah called her elderly Aunt Rose, Grandpa Chen's sister-in-law, who was now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack. "Oh yes, dear," Rose said when Sarah carefully brought up family history. "Your father-in-law's adoption was no secret back then. Such a tragedy when his parents died, but the Chens were good people who opened their hearts. He always said love makes a family, not blood." It breaks my heart to hear some of the younger generation has forgotten that lesson. Sarah realized that Rose knew exactly what had been happening to Emma. Why hasn't anyone said anything? Because we're old, and we hoped the younger folks would handle their own problem. But maybe it's time some truths came to light. That sweet Emma of yours has more Chen spirit than some who were born with the name. By the end of the week, Sarah had her strategy. She would organize a family dinner, not a casual gathering, but a formal affair to properly celebrate Emma's achievements and honor our family legacy. She sent elegant invitations to the extended family, including elderly relatives who rarely attended casual barbecues but would come for something billed as important. She prepared a photo presentation about 4 generations of Chen family values, carefully selecting images that would tell the story she needed to tell. She made copies of documents, organized her evidence, and practiced her words until they flowed like water. Emma noticed her mother's focused energy and asked what she was planning. "Justice, sweetheart," Sarah replied simply. "I'm planning justice." On the day of the dinner, Sarah transformed her dining room into an elegant showcase. She used her grandmother's china, lit candles, and prepared all of Grandpa Chen's favorite dishes. The extended family arrived dressed in their best clothes, curious about the formal invitation and the promise of honoring family legacy. Madison arrived with Carol, dressed in a new outfit, and clearly expecting to be the center of attention again. She had spent the week telling anyone who would listen about how dramatic Emma was being about just a little family honesty. As they gathered around the table, Sarah stood to address the room, her laptop ready for the presentation, her evidence organized, and her words chosen with surgical precision. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Emma's remarkable achievements and to discuss what it truly means to be part of the Chen family," she began, her voice steady and warm. "I think it's time we had some important conversations about our family values, our history, and what we expect from each other going forward." Madison smiled smugly, clearly expecting another opportunity to demonstrate her supposed superiority. She had no idea that Sarah had spent a week building a trap that would expose every ugly truth Madison had tried to hide. The dinner began beautifully, with Sarah playing the role of gracious hostess to perfection. She served Grandpa Chen's favorite dishes, hand-pulled noodles, red-cooked pork, and steamed fish with ginger, while sharing warm memories of the family patriarch who had passed away 5 years earlier. Emma sat quietly beside her mother, having been briefed that something significant was planned, but not knowing the full scope of Sarah's strategy. She wore the jade bracelet Grandpa Chen had given her for her 16th birthday, a piece of family jewelry that had sparked Madison's jealousy at the time. "Before we begin the presentation," Sarah announced, "I thought we should go around the table and share what Grandpa Chen meant to each of us. Madison, why don't you start? You always had such wonderful things to say about him." Madison practically glowed at being chosen first, straightening in her chair as she launched into a rehearsed speech she'd clearly been preparing. "Grandpa Chen was the embodiment of everything our family stands for," Madison began, her voice taking on the pompous tone she used when she wanted to sound important. "He came to America with nothing but determination, and built our family's success through pure hard work and natural Chen intelligence. He understood the importance of keeping family traditions strong and passing down our heritage to the right people, the ones who truly belong." Several elderly relatives shifted uncomfortably, exchanging meaningful glances that Madison completely missed in her self-absorbed performance. "He taught us that family blood runs deep," Madison continued, warming to her, "but the values and strength that come from genuine family connections can't be replicated or adopted. He built his legacy for his real descendants, the ones who carry his DNA and his authentic Chen spirit." Aunt Rose coughed delicately, but Madison was too caught up in her own words to notice the warning. "I think Grandpa Chen would be proud to see how his true family members are continuing his legacy," Madison concluded with a pointed look at Emma. "And I think he'd want his resources and opportunities to go to the people who were born to deserve them, not just anyone who happened to end up at our family table." The silence that followed was deafening. Uncle Mike set down his chopsticks with a sharp click. Aunt Linda's face had gone pale. Even Carol looked uncomfortable, finally realizing that Madison had gone too far. Emma's shoulders tensed, and Sarah saw her daughter's hands clench in her lap. But before Sarah could intervene, Madison apparently decided she hadn't been clear enough. "I mean, let's be honest," Madison said with a laugh that sounded more nervous than confident. "Emma's achievements are impressive for someone in her situation, but it's not like she's really carrying on Grandpa Chen's bloodline. She's getting opportunities that should be going to actual Chen descendants. It's just not fair to the rest of us who have to compete with diversity picks." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Carol started to reach for Madison's arm, finally recognizing the danger, but it was too late. Madison had walked directly into Sarah's carefully laid trap. Sarah felt a cold smile spread across her face as she stood up, her laptop presentation ready to begin. "Madison, that was absolutely perfect," Sarah said, her voice honey-sweet with just an edge of steel that made everyone at the table sit up straighter. "Your thoughts about bloodlines and authentic family heritage are so interesting. I think everyone here would love to hear more about your understanding of Grandpa Chen's legacy and what makes someone a real Chen family member." Madison preened, completely oblivious to the danger. "Well, I've always been interested in our family history. I think it's important to preserve the truth about who we really are." "The truth," Sarah repeated slowly, savoring the word. "Yes, Madison, I think it's time we talked about the truth. About Grandpa Chen's real story, about what authentic family values actually look like, and about who in this room has really been honoring his legacy." Around the table, the older relatives leaned forward with anticipation, while Carol went completely white. Madison, still clueless, nodded eagerly. "I'd love to share what I know about our family's authentic heritage," Madison said confidently. "Some people need to understand what real Chen values look like." Sarah's smile became positively predatory as she opened her laptop and turned it toward the room. "Oh, Madison," she said softly, "you have no idea how much you're about to learn." Sarah clicked to her first slide, a beautiful black and white photograph of a young man in a 1960s suit, standing beside an older Chinese couple. The resemblance to their beloved patriarch was unmistakable. "This is a photo of Grandpa Chen on his 18th birthday," Sarah began, her voice carrying perfectly across the now silent dining room. "Madison, since you're so passionate about authentic Chen heritage and bloodlines, why don't you tell everyone what you know about this milestone in his life?" Madison studied the photo with the confidence of someone who had never been caught in a lie. "Well, obviously this was when he was starting to build his success. You can see the determination in his face, that genetic Chen strength that he passed down to his real descendant." "Genetic Chen strength," Sarah repeated slowly. "That's fascinating. And what do you think this document might be?" She clicked to the next slide, displaying the faded adoption certificate she'd discovered. The room went utterly still, as the words "adoption decree" became visible at the top of the legal document. Madison squinted at the screen, her confidence beginning to waver. What is that?" "This, Madison, is Grandpa Chen's adoption certificate," Sarah announced clearly. "It shows that our beloved family patriarch, the man you just spent 10 minutes praising for his genetic Chen intelligence and authentic bloodline, was adopted by the Chen family when he was 5 years old, after his birth parents died in a car accident." The impact was immediate and devastating. Madison's face went through several shades of red and white as the implications hit her. Around the table, several relatives gasped, though the elderly ones merely nodded with knowing expression. "According to your logic, Madison," Sarah continued relentlessly, "Grandpa Chen was just some random kid that the Chen family picked up. He had no Chen blood, no genetic heritage, and no birthright to any of the success he built. By your standards, he was an outsider who took opportunities away from the real family members." Madison's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. Carol tried to intervene, but Sarah wasn't finished. "But let's dig deeper into your thoughts about authentic Akini values," Sarah said, clicking to a new slide that showed a timeline. "Emma has been part of our family for 13 years. Grandpa Chen lived with his adoptive family for 12 years before he left home to start his own life. So by pure mathematics, Emma has actually been a Chen longer than our family patriarch had been when he began building his legacy." The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. Aunt Rose spoke up clearly. "We all knew about the adoption, dear. It was never a secret in our generation. Love makes a family, not blood. That's what your grandfather always said." Sarah clicked to another slide showing Emma's achievements laid out in timeline format. "Now, let's talk about what real Chen values actually look like." Emma maintains a perfect GPA while working 2 part-time jobs. She volunteers at the Children's Hospital every weekend, tutoring young patients who've fallen behind in school. She's published in peer-reviewed journals and has developed water purification systems for rural communities. She learned Mandarin to honor our family heritage, something you never bothered to do, Madison. Madison found her voice, but it came out as a strangled whisper. That's not the same thing. You're absolutely right, Sarah said, her voice cutting like a blade. It's not the same thing, because Emma earned every single one of her opportunities through merit, hard work, and character. She never asked for special treatment, never expected anything to be handed to her, and never once complained about having to work twice as hard to prove herself. Sarah clicked to her next slide and Madison's face went completely white. It was a screenshot of her academic transcript showing her plagiarism incidents and academic probation status. Which brings us to you, Madison, Sarah continued remorselessly. The person who claims to represent authentic Chen values is currently on academic probation for cheating and plagiarism. You've been suspended from 2 classes and are barely maintaining your enrollment. The girl you called a diversity pick has earned full scholarships to Stanford and MIT, while you can't even maintain a C average without cheating. Carol finally found her voice. Sarah, this is inappropriate. Is it inappropriate, Carol? Sarah turned to her sister with laser focus. Is it inappropriate to discuss academic integrity? Or perhaps we should talk about financial integrity instead? Sarah clicked to her final slide, showing bank transaction record. Because while Madison has been calling Emma an outsider who doesn't deserve family resources, you've been quietly borrowing money from Emma's college fund. $15,000, Carol. Money I've been saving for my daughter's education, taken without permission over the past 8 months. The room exploded. Uncle Mike stood up so fast his chair fell over. Aunt Linda gasped audibly. Even the younger cousins looked shocked at the revelation. You've been stealing from Emma's college fund, while letting your daughter torture her about not deserving opportunity. Uncle Mike's voice was thunderous. While Emma worked part-time jobs to save for college, you were taking her money. Carol's face crumpled as she realized her secret was exposed. Madison looked around the table frantically, seeing the disgust and anger in every face. But Sarah wasn't done. She turned back to Madison with quiet, deadly precision. So let's recap your understanding of authentic Chen values, Madison. You believe that genetics matter more than character, that bloodlines matter more than merit, and that some family members deserve more opportunities than others based on how they joined the family. But the family patriarch you worship was adopted. The girl you call an outsider has lived here longer than he had at her age. She's achieved more academically than you ever will, shown more integrity than you've ever demonstrated, and contributed more to this family than you ever have. Sarah paused, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Emma has shown more Chen family values in her 16 years than you've shown in 19. Sarah concluded. She's been more loyal, more hardworking, more generous and more honorable than the person who shares your mother's DNA. So tell me, Madison, who exactly doesn't belong in this family? Madison broke down completely, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of her hypocrisy and cruelty crashed down on her. Around the table, family members stared at her with a mixture of disgust and pity. Emma, who had been silent throughout the devastating revelation, finally spoke in a clear, dignified voice that carried across the room. I've spent years trying to prove I belonged in this family, but I realize now that I don't need to prove my worth to people who can't see it. I know who I am and I know who my real family is. She stood up gracefully, her jade bracelet catching the candlelight as she placed her hand on Sarah's shoulder. Thank you, Mom, for showing me that love and loyalty matter more than blood. Grandpa Chen would be proud of the family values you've taught me. As Emma walked out of the room with her head held high, Madison's sobs echoed in the silence she left behind. The immediate aftermath of Sarah's revelation was swift and decisive. Uncle Mike was the first to break the stunned silence, his voice shaking with anger as he addressed Carol directly. How could you let this happen? How could you stand by while your daughter tortured Emma and then steal money meant for her education? He turned to Madison with disgust. And you, after everything this family has given you, this is how you treat one of our own? Aunt Linda nodded vigorously, her usual diplomatic demeanor replaced by maternal fury. Emma has been nothing but a blessing to this family. She's kind, hardworking, and respectful. The way you've treated her is shameful, Madison. One by one, family members spoke up, their voices creating a chorus of condemnation that left Madison nowhere to hide. The cousins who had laughed at her cruel jokes now looked embarrassed and ashamed. The elderly relatives who had remained silent during years of microaggressions finally voiced their disapproval. Aunt Rose, The family matriarch spoke with the authority of her 83 years. In my day, we understood that family is about who shows up, who cares, and who contributes. Emma has been more family to us than some people born with our name. Carol attempted damage control, her tears mixing with desperate explanations about financial stress and Madison's struggles. But the family's patience had been exhausted. The years of enabling Madison's cruelty while ignoring Emma's pain had finally caught up with them. The money will be returned immediately, Carol whispered, unable to meet Sarah's eyes. I'll take out a loan if I have to. You will, Sarah replied firmly. Every penny with interest. And Madison will personally apologize to Emma when Emma is ready to hear it, not before. Madison's breakdown continued through the night, her sobs audible from the guest room where Carol had taken her to recover. The golden child who had cruised through life on privilege and entitlement was finally confronting the reality of her actions and their consequences. 3 months later, the changes in family dynamics were profound and lasting. Emma chose Stanford and threw herself into her freshman year with characteristic determination, but now she carried herself with a new confidence born from finally understanding her worth. The family members who had witnessed Sarah's revelations became Emma's most vocal supporters, sharing her achievements with pride and making sure she felt truly welcomed at every gathering. Madison, meanwhile, faced the harsh consequences of her exposed behavior. Her extended family's disapproval followed her back to college, where she was forced to repeat several courses due to her academic probation. The social consequences within the family were severe. Invitations to family events became rare, and when she did attend, she was treated with the cool politeness reserved for unwelcome guests. But perhaps more importantly, Madison was forced into therapy by her college's academic intervention program. Over months of sessions, she began to unpack the insecurity and entitlement that had driven her cruelty. The process was painful and humbling, but it gradually led to genuine self-reflection. 6 months after the dinner, Madison wrote a letter to Emma, not the perfunctory apology Carol had initially demanded, but a thoughtful, detailed acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to minimize her actions. Instead, she took full responsibility and outlined the work she was doing to become a better person. Emma, secure in her new understanding of her place in the family, eventually chose to respond. Their relationship would never be close, but it evolved into something civil and honest. Madison learned to admire Emma's achievements without resentment, while Emma learned that forgiveness could coexist with healthy boundaries. Carol worked 2 part-time jobs for over a year to repay the money she had stolen, the financial strain serving as a constant reminder of her poor judgment. Her relationship with Sarah required extensive rebuilding, based on new foundations of honesty and respect for Emma's place in the family. 2 years later, Stanford graduation. The Stanford graduation ceremony was held on a perfect California day, with families gathered under blue skies to celebrate their children's achievement. Emma walked across the stage summa cum laude, her biomedical engineering degree earned alongside research that had already been accepted for publication in 3 major journals. In the audience, Sarah watched with tears streaming down her face as her daughter, brilliant, kind, and unshakably confident in her worth, accepted her diploma. Surrounding them were the family members who had learned what it truly meant to support and celebrate Emma: Uncle Mike and Aunt Linda, Aunt Rose in her wheelchair but determined to be there, and even some of the younger cousins who had become Emma's genuine supporter. Madison was there too, sitting quietly with Carol in the back rows. She had completed her degree finally, and was working as a teacher's aide while applying to education programs focused on helping struggling students. Her presence was a testament to growth rather than entitlement. She came to celebrate Emma's achievement, not to claim any spotlight for herself. During the reception, Emma gave a speech that brought the entire family to tears. She spoke about resilience, about the difference between belonging and earning your place, and about the family members who had taught her that love is a choice made daily through actions and support. My mom taught me that family isn't just about sharing DNA, Emma said, her voice clear and strong. It's about sharing values, sharing struggles, and choosing to lift each other up. Some of the strongest family bonds are forged through choice, not She looked directly at Sarah, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. Thank you for choosing me, for fighting for me, and for showing me that I never had to earn my place in your heart. And thank you for teaching me to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah reflected on the painful journey that had brought them to this moment. The confrontation 2 years ago had been necessary but costly. It had fractured some relationships while strengthening others. But seeing Emma now, confident and successful and truly secure in her place in the world, Sarah knew it had been worth every difficult moment. Emma had learned that she didn't need to prove her worth to earn love and belonging. She had learned to recognize her own value independent of others' approval. Most importantly, she had learned that true family members are the ones who fight for you when it matters most. And Madison had learned that privilege without character is meaningless, that cruelty has consequences, and that real strength comes from building others up rather than tearing them down. The family emerged changed but stronger, built on foundations of honesty rather than politeness, character rather than convenience. It was exactly the legacy that Grandpa Chen himself, an adopted child who became a beloved patriarch, would have wanted for the family that bore his name.